Departure point. The letter felt heavier than paper should, Olivia Reed thought as she placed it in Nathan's campus mailbox. 22 years old, with auburn hair that caught fire in the September sunlight, she pressed her fingertips against the envelope one last time. Her green eyes, usually bright with laughter, were hollow now. "It's the only way," she whispered to herself, the hallway of the University of Oregon's Mitchell Hall mercifully empty as tears threatened to spill. 3 days earlier, she'd received the call that changed everything. Her sister Claire, just 19, collapsed during freshman orientation at Berkeley. The diagnosis came quickly and mercilessly, aplastic anemia severe. Claire needed a bone marrow donor and round-the-clock care for at least a year. Olivia remembered Nathan's face when he'd shared his acceptance letter to the prestigious environmental research program in Costa Rica. How his dark eyes lit up, how his hands, always gentle, always steady, had trembled with excitement. 3 years studying cloud forest ecology, Liv. It's everything I've worked for. She loved him too much to make him choose. That evening, Nathan Prescott bounded up the stairs to his apartment whistling. At 23, he moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly where life was taking him. He collected his mail absently, thumbing through it as he unlocked his door. When he saw Olivia's handwriting, he smiled. Probably another one of her spontaneous love notes. He'd saved everyone. Inside, he dropped his backpack, opened a beer, and settled onto his couch before opening the letter. 60 seconds later, the bottle slipped from his fingers, spilling across the floor. "I need to end things between us," the letter read. "I've realized my feelings have changed. The timing with your research program made me examine what I truly want, and it's not a long-distance relationship. I'm sorry to do this by letter, but I think a clean break is best. Please don't contact me. This decision is final." Nathan read it 3 times, his breathing shallow. This couldn't be Olivia. Not his Olivia who cried during nature documentaries, who stayed up all night helping him practice presentations, who just last week had whispered plans for their future against his skin. He called her immediately. Straight to voicemail. He texted, "We need to talk, please." No response. By evening, he was at her apartment, pounding on the door. Her roommate Maya answered, looking uncomfortable. "She's not here, Nate. She left campus. Said she needed to go home for a while." "What happened?" he demanded, voice breaking. "Everything was perfect yesterday." Maya shook her head. "I don't know. She packed in a hurry, told me to tell you she meant what she wrote. I'm sorry." In the days that followed, Nathan cycled through confusion, anger, and grief. He showed up at her classes. He called her parents' home in Seattle. Nothing. 2 weeks later, he found her student ID in his bathroom drawer. When he went to return it to the university office, they informed him that Olivia Reed had formally withdrawn from the university that semester. By month's end, Nathan departed for Costa Rica, taking with him the shattered pieces of what he thought had been real love, and leaving behind a woman who sobbed herself to sleep each night beside her sister's hospital bed. Parallel lives, 7 years transformed landscapes, both physical and emotional. Nathan stood at the podium of the International Conference on Climate Resilience in Chicago, his presentation on sustainable water management in drought-prone regions drawing to a close. And so, by implementing these community-based irrigation systems, we've seen a 40% increase in crop yields while reducing water consumption by nearly a third. His confidence was polished now, his tall frame carrying the gravitas of expertise. The audience applauded as he thanked them and stepped down. In the hotel lobby afterward, a colleague approached. "Brilliant work, Prescott. Your time in Guatemala really paid off." Nathan smiled, accepting the compliment with a nod. At 30, he'd built a respectable career, traveling between continents, publishing papers, and slowly healing from a wound he rarely acknowledged anymore. Dating had been sporadic, intense connections that inevitably cooled when they reached a certain depth. His friends called him guarded. He called himself cautious. Across the city, in a light-filled studio at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Olivia adjusted the guitar in her lap. The circle of patients around her, all cancer survivors, followed her lead, strumming gently. "Music gives us a language when words fail," she said softly. "Let's try that progression again." Her life had found unexpected purpose after Claire's recovery. The long hours in hospital rooms had revealed Olivia's gift for bringing comfort through music. Now a certified music therapist with a master's degree, she specialized in working with patients facing life-altering diagnoses. Claire had been in remission for 5 years, thriving as an elementary school teacher in Portland. Their parents had retired to Arizona, leaving Olivia to build her own life in Chicago, where she'd completed her graduate studies. At 29, she lived alone in a small apartment filled with instruments and plants, dating occasionally but never allowing relationships to deepen. Later that evening, Olivia scanned the program for the interdisciplinary wellness symposium she'd been invited to attend the following day. Her department head had suggested she network with environmental scientists about potential outdoor therapy programs. A name jumped from the page: Nathan Prescott, Ph.D. Her heart stilled. It couldn't be him. And yet, the biographical note mentioned Oregon and tropical ecology research. She set down the program with trembling hands. The next morning, Nathan sat in a panel discussion, half listening as a pediatrician discussed green spaces in children's hospitals. His attention drifted to the door as a latecomer slipped quietly into the conference room. Auburn hair caught the light. A profile turned, revealing the curve of a cheek he would know anywhere. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and 7 years collapsed into a single breathless moment. Olivia froze, color draining from her face. Then, composing herself with visible effort, she nodded slightly in acknowledgement before taking a seat as far from him as possible. Nathan barely registered the remainder of the panel. When the moderator called for a break, he rose immediately, but Olivia had already disappeared into the hallway crowd. "You look like you've seen a ghost," remarked Dr. Anita Sharma, a colleague from Berkeley who had collaborated with him on several projects. "I think I have," Nathan replied, still staring at the doorway. "Someone from your Oregon days?" Anita asked. When he nodded, she continued, "I was at Berkeley around the same time. Maybe I know them." "Olivia Reed," he said, the name still feeling sacred somehow despite everything. Anita's eyes widened with recognition. "Reed, the music therapist? I know her work. Her sister was my student, had a terrible health crisis years ago. Olivia gave up everything to be her donor and caretaker." Nathan's world tilted on its axis as pieces of a puzzle he'd stopped trying to solve suddenly rearranged themselves. Rekindled harmony. 3 months passed, measured in careful steps toward one another. Weekly video calls bridged the distance between Chicago and Portland, where Nathan had taken a visiting position at the university to be closer. Their first real date was at a small bistro near Powell's Books, neutral territory. They arrived as polished strangers making cautious conversation over dinner. But by dessert, they'd fallen into the familiar rhythm of finishing each other's sentences, laughing at the same obscure jokes. "I keep waiting for it to feel weird," Olivia admitted as they walked along the waterfront afterward. "But it doesn't. It feels like finding something I didn't realize I was still looking for," Nathan replied, his hand tentatively finding hers. Building something new required patience. They agreed not to rush, each carrying lessons from what they'd lost. November brought Nathan to Chicago for a conference, where he witnessed Olivia leading a music therapy session with pediatric patients. Watching her gentle guidance, seeing how the children responded to her, he understood how completely she'd transformed her pain into purpose. December found them in Seattle for Christmas, where Olivia introduced Nathan to her parents and Claire. Her sister studied him intently before pulling him aside. "She was never the same after she left you," Claire told him quietly. "Even after I recovered. There was always a sadness she couldn't shake." "I understand why she did it," Nathan replied. "I'm still working through it, but I understand." Claire nodded, satisfied. "Don't waste any more time, then." January brought a snowstorm that grounded Nathan's flight back to Portland. They ended up trapped in Olivia's apartment for 3 days, cooking elaborate meals from whatever was in her pantry, playing music, and truly talking about the years they'd missed. On the second night, as they sat before her small fireplace, Nathan finally asked the question that had lingered. Was there ever anyone else? Anyone important? Olivia considered this, tucking her feet beneath her on the couch. There were relationships, a few that almost became serious. She looked at him directly. But I never let anyone close enough to risk that kind of loss again. You? Similar story, he admitted. There was someone in Guatemala for nearly a year. She ended it because she said I kept parts of myself locked away. He smiled ruefully. She wasn't wrong. Olivia moved closer, her head finding the familiar hollow of his shoulder. We're different people now. Better, I think, Nathan murmured against her hair. Stronger individually. February brought a joint project, a proposal for outdoor music therapy sessions in watershed conservation areas, combining their expertise. As they worked side by side in Olivia's small home office, the boundaries between colleagues, friends, and something more blurred entirely. When he finally kissed her, it wasn't like the passionate exchanges of their youth. This was deliberate, tender, a promise made with full awareness of what it meant to keep it. By spring, Nathan had accepted a permanent position in Chicago. Olivia helped him find an apartment, deliberately not her own, both agreeing they needed to build this new relationship properly, with intention rather than momentum. On a warm evening in May, they returned to the garden terrace of the hotel where they'd reconnected. Nathan had arranged a private dinner under string lights, the Chicago skyline creating a backdrop of possibilities. I've been thinking about what Claire said at Christmas, he told her, as they lingered over dessert. About not wasting more time. Olivia's eyes met his, steady and clear. And we lost 7 years to a lie told out of love, he said, reaching across the table for her hands. I don't want to lose another day to fear or doubt. What are you saying exactly? She asked, though the smile spreading across her face suggested she already knew. Nathan moved from his chair to kneel beside her. I'm saying I love who you were at 22, who had the courage to sacrifice everything for her sister. And I love who you've become, this incredible, compassionate woman who transforms pain into healing. I want to build a life with both versions of you, if you'll have me. Tears glistened in Olivia's eyes as she pulled him to his feet. You realize this isn't a fairy tale ending, she warned softly. We still have things to work through. I don't want an ending at all, Nathan replied, sliding a ring onto her finger. Just a different beginning. As they sealed this promise with a kiss, the fountain beside them caught the last light of day, water droplets suspended momentarily in golden illumination, like 7 years of separation transformed into something beautiful, something worth the wait. In time, they would build a home filled with music and purpose, their shared work touching lives across communities. They would face challenges together, no longer protecting each other through distance, but through presence, through truth. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Olivia would still marvel at how a lie meant to free them both had instead kept them bound to each other across time and distance until truth finally set them free to find their way back home. Shadows revealed. The hotel bar was dimly lit, offering Nathan a moment of anonymity as he processed Anita's revelation. The casual comment, Olivia gave up everything, played on loop in his mind. Claire Reed was one of my brightest undergrads before she got sick, Anita continued, sipping her wine. Aplastic anemia. Nearly died. Olivia was her perfect match, both for bone marrow and as a caretaker. Dropped out of school immediately, I heard. Nathan set his whiskey down untouched. When was this exactly? Fall semester. Must have been 7 years ago now. Claire was in freshman orientation when she collapsed. Anita paused, studying his expression. You didn't know, did you? The timing aligned perfectly with their breakup. Nathan felt lightheaded, memories reshuffling like cards dealt by a new hand. We were together, he said finally. Olivia and I. When she left, she told me she didn't want to be with me anymore, that her feelings had changed. Anita's eyes softened with understanding. She never mentioned you, but I remember Claire saying something about her sister giving up a scholarship and a relationship. Said she felt guilty for years about it. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. I was leaving for a research position in Costa Rica, 3 years minimum commitment. And let me guess, you wouldn't have gone if you'd known. Of course not, he said, the certainty in his voice surprising even himself. Anita smiled sadly. That's exactly why she wouldn't tell you. The conference reception that evening became an exercise in hyper-awareness. Nathan scanned every cluster of attendees for a glimpse of auburn hair, rehearsing and discarding opening lines. He found her eventually by the windows, looking out at Chicago's skyline. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair shorter than he remembered, falling just below her shoulders. "Olivia?" She turned, composure firmly in place, though her knuckles whitened around her glass. "Nathan, I was wondering if we'd actually speak. You disappeared pretty quickly after the panel. Professional habit. I'm good at quiet exits." The barb landed as intended. 7 years of hurt compressed into 6 words. "I ran into Anita Sharma today," he said, watching her face carefully. "She mentioned knowing your sister at Berkeley." Something flashed in Olivia's eyes. Alarm, then resignation. "I see." "No, I don't think you do." Nathan's voice remained steady, though his heart hammered. "She told me about Claire's diagnosis, about you being her donor, about when it happened." Olivia set her drink down, suddenly needing both hands free. "Nathan, fall semester 7 years ago, the exact time you wrote me a letter saying your feelings had changed." His voice caught. "You lied to me." A couple nearby glanced over curiously. Olivia straightened her shoulders. "Not here," she said quietly. "There's a garden terrace on the 4th floor." They rode the elevator in tense silence. Outside, Chicago's night air carried the first hint of autumn chill. They stood beside a small fountain, whose gentle splashing provided both soundtrack and privacy. "Claire needed me," Olivia said simply. The prognosis was grim without immediate intervention. She had no one else. "And you thought I wouldn't understand that?" Nathan asked, the pain of 7 years evident in his voice. "I knew you would understand. That was the problem." She looked at him directly now. "You would have given up Costa Rica, your research, your future. That should have been my choice to make. You would have resented us eventually. You don't know that." "I couldn't risk Claire's life on a maybe," she said, her composure finally cracking. "And I couldn't ask you to put your life on hold for years while I lived in hospital rooms in fear." Nathan stepped closer. "So instead you made me believe that what we had meant nothing to you." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek. "It meant everything. That's why I had to let you go." Confrontation and confession. The garden terrace fell silent except for the fountain's gentle murmur. Nathan's gaze never left Olivia's face, studying the new lines at the corners of her eyes, the resolute set of her jaw that hadn't changed. "How is Claire now?" he asked, his voice softer. Something in Olivia relaxed at the question. "She's well, teaching 3rd grade in Portland, married last year." "And you never told her about us? About why you really ended things?" "She figured it out eventually. She found an old photo of us in my things during her recovery." Olivia moved to a stone bench and sat down. "We had a terrible fight. She said I had no right to make that sacrifice without telling you the truth." Nathan remained standing, his tall frame silhouetted against Chicago's glittering skyline. "She was right. Maybe." Olivia looked up at him. "But I did what I thought was necessary in an impossible situation. I was 22, terrified of losing my sister, and equally terrified of being the reason you gave up your dreams. You didn't trust me enough to make my own decision." "I trusted that you loved me enough to stay," she countered. "That's why I couldn't tell you." Nathan finally sat beside her, careful to maintain distance between them. "Do you know what it did to me? I questioned everything, every moment, every promise, everything I thought we had built. I spent years trying to understand what went wrong." Olivia's composure crumbled entirely then. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I thought about contacting you so many times, especially after Claire got better. But it seemed cruel to disrupt your life just to ease my conscience." "So what was your plan? Hope we'd never cross paths again?" "Chicago is a big city. The odds seemed in my favor." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Until they weren't." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Olivia's heart ache. "I deserved the truth," he said finally, "even if it was years later." "You're right." She met his gaze directly. "I made the wrong choice in how I handled it. Not in being there for Claire, I could never regret that, but in how I left you. You deserved better. The honesty hung between them, fragile and raw. Why music therapy? Nathan asked suddenly, the abrupt change of subject momentarily disorienting her. The hospitals, she replied after a moment. During Claire's treatment, I saw how music reached patients when nothing else could. It became my anchor during the worst days. She paused. And yours? Environmental science was always your path, but what led you to water conservation specifically? Costa Rica, ironically. I witnessed firsthand how changing rainfall patterns devastated communities. He hesitated, and I needed something to pour myself into completely. Understanding passed between them, how pain had shaped them both, channeled them toward helping others in different ways. I should have trusted you with the truth, Olivia said quietly. That's what I regret most. Nathan nodded, his anger softening at the edges. I would have waited for you, you know. I know. The city lights blurred through her tears as Nathan cautiously reached across the space between them, his fingers lightly touching the back of her hand. We've lost so much time, he murmured. Maybe too much, she responded, though she didn't pull away. I don't know, Nathan said. But I'd like to find out who we are now, if you're willing. For the first time that evening, Olivia's smile reached her eyes. I'd like that. As they left the garden, returning to the conference below, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet, but the possibility of it, delicate as a first bloom after winter.